Electrocast.
Why wait to see if you'll get something you like this Valentine's Day when you can go to BlueNile.com and find something you'll love? Whether you're looking to treat yourself to a little winter sparkle or show a galentine how much you appreciate them, Blue Nile offers a wide selection of high-quality designs, expert guidance, and free 30-day returns for the ultimate peace of mind. You can even design your own jewelry. Right now, save up to 50% at BlueNile.com. That's BlueNile.com.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. From the launch your online shop stage, all the way to the we just hit 1 million orders stage. No matter what stage you're in, Shopify's there to help you grow. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/special offer, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/special offer.
How we doing, everybody? My name is Bob Kelly, and I'm here with Rayshawn Buchanan, Joe Malkin, Michael Marcangelo, and of course, the greatest producer in the game, Craig D'Alessandro. And welcome to the inaugural episode of the New England Championship ReWrap. This is a show where we will break down not only the most important moments and games of each Boston championship that we have all experienced, but more importantly, the feelings and emotional connection each one of us has with that specific championship. Tonight, jump in our time machine as we start where it all began. The team that was the launch of a dynasty and the first of many for the Boston sports world over the next 20-plus years, the 2001 New England Patriots. A quick program note. We had so many memories and feelings associated with this season that it took about 3 hours to record this podcast. So we're doing this season in 2 parts. Part 1 begins now.
So jacked up for this one. This is my favorite of the 12. Sorry to the Red Sox, the Celtics, the Bruins, and any of the other 5 Patriots Super Bowls. This one means the most, I think, to New England. And personally, it means the most to me. And I told you guys in our chat, I might cry during this one, but we're gonna get through it.
Listen, I'll tell you what. Doing all the research for this one, I got goosebumps at least 5, 6, 7 times just hearing Gino when and the Patriots are Super Bowl champion, like all that stuff, man. It gives me straight goosebumps, and I'm the least Patriots fan out of everyone here. All right. No, and even still, this is still one of my favorite Boston championships ever.
Well, absolutely. I mean, even when Geno Santos yelled, that famous call, and then you see Antoine Smith run onto the field, hands a pumping, like, I mean, it was just elation because you didn't know how that season was going to end the way it started, and we'll get to that, and Bobby will drive us through that over this podcast. But you didn't know where it was going to go, and that was the best part looking back on it.
Right. No, exactly. Especially leading into the season. Like I said, this is the most improbable one of the entire championships. Now, if you guys remember, the Patriots did go to the Super Bowl back in 1996. We're just going to set the stage a little bit for you. Get in your time machine. We're going back to 2001, guys. All right. So if you remember, 1996, Patriots go to the Super Bowl, lose to the Packers. Big Tuna leaves town right after that Super Bowl, and ever since, it's been an absolute downfall for the Patriots. They hire Pete Carroll. He comes in and leads them 10-6. They lose in the wild card. 9-7, then 8-8. And at that point, you could just see that downward trend of this team. There was no upside to it. There was no excitement. So they decided to fire Pete Carroll, and they brought in what we didn't know at the time was the greatest head coach in Patriots history. Now, Mike, do you remember the day Bill Belichick was hired?
Yeah, I do. I did not know who Bill Belichick was at that point in time, but like now it's just I remember like that huge controversy because he was supposed to be the coach of the Jets.
He was the coach of the Jets.
He was the coach of the Jets for for one day, and then he's gone, and now he's on the Patriots podium. I just kept thinking, like, who is this? Like, what are they doing? And then, I mean, we'll talk about it more later, but after the first season, you're like, maybe they made a mistake.
To expand off what Mike just said, the rumor and the story is that Bill Belichick was offered the job by Robert Kraft on a napkin at a restaurant. that he offered him the job, and he ended up taking it. And what's interesting, and we've all done the research and watched the America's Game 2001 New England Patriots, but you look back at that, and I mean, Bill Belichick was on Parcells' staff that Super Bowl year in '96. He was coaching the defensive backs. Right. I mean, he had been here before, and like Mike said, we didn't know who the heck he was. I mean, you can look at the Patriots coaching staff now, and they're a little more well known because we got to figure out who to blame if something happens. But I mean, we didn't know who he was in '96, and then and as Mike just said in 2001, who the heck is this guy?
Well, and even to that same point, you know what I mean? Even in that first 2000 season, I mean, granted, he did draft the best quarterback ever in his first draft ever in the 6th round. Again, we didn't know it at the time how great that pick was. But even that first season, he went 5-11. He was on the hot seat after that first season. Like, this was not something that anyone saw coming for even 1 second. You know what I mean? That team was in dismay going into that 2001 season. Belichick was on the hot seat. People were wondering if Bledsoe, which actually going back a little bit, Bledsoe was given about over
a 10-year,
10 year. It was one of the biggest contracts at the time.
And people were already questioning that, seeing this team downfall from 10-6, 9-7, 8-8. People were like, "Is this $100 million quarterback even worth it at this point?" This team was a mess going into the 2000 season, and it's crazy to say that because the word mediocre and the word New England Patriots at this point in our lives just don't get said together. But at that time, it wasn't just said together; it was just facts. That team was mediocre going into that season.
Well, the Patriots were almost a laughingstock of the NFL for so many years. I mean, a team that was founded in 1960, couldn't find a stadium. I mean, they played at Harvard, they played at Fenway, they played wherever they could find a place to play. And, they had some good teams. I mean, the Boston Patriots won their division in 1963, but over the years, they didn't do much. I mean, they had good players. I mean, Stanley Morgan, Sam Bam Cunningham, Steve Grogan. I mean, they had guys, and that's just to name the first 3 that come off the top of my head, but they never did it. John Hanna, offensive lineman of all time.
Mike's favorite jersey of all time.
Yeah. That's true. And it just, you're right. At that time, Bobby, I mean, I think mediocre was even giving them a little more credit than they deserved. I mean, they got smoked in the '85 Super Bowl against the Bears. And
then nothing after that.
Right. And then they effectively got smoked in '96 against the Packers. So 2000, you go through this whole draft and you draft a guy 199 overall, which not only was he 199 overall in the 6th round, but it was a compensatory pick. And I think we all know who that was, and we'll drop his name a little bit as we go on here, but mediocre was being light on that team at that point.
But even to speak about with Bill, remember, he was the coach of the Browns. Now that we didn't know that then, but looking back at it, the only playoff win that Cleveland's had was because of Bill, and that win actually came against the Patriots in the '94 wild card game. So, and actually he beat Parcells, so it was the pupil beating the teacher there. So, they was building something there in Cleveland. Obviously, Cleveland goes off to Baltimore, and they go away. But like you said, like you guys already said, he was on the hot seat. We didn't know what to come in. So thank God for what ended up happening that season. We're going to get into that. So
I also wonder. I've always thought about after the 2000 season, right? Can you imagine what's going through Belichick's head? He literally lit his relationship with Parcells on fire over this. Mm-hmm. They have never been the same. And they've
only been in the same room once since then.
The two Bills.
That was a great special, by the way.
And even during that special, you could see that things had not been fully patched up.
Yeah, you can see the mutual respect. And,
I was just going to say that.
Was there. Yeah. But Bill Parcells never forgave him for doing that.
Well, Parcells was kind of a tough guy after he left New England. I mean, what he did everywhere else he went. I mean, he's such an old school guy that he didn't latch on anywhere. He went, and I think his last stop was when he was the president of football operations down in
Dolphins,
Miami.
Right, yeah.
And he couldn't even do anything there. But that's a different market. But
well, he did though. He did. He brought 115 to 10-6. Remember? That Dolphins team wasn't that bad his first year. I don't know if it had anything to do with him, but no, like you just said, that respect that those two had, that they built, because if you remember Bill Belichick, his resume was really impressive. That man was the defensive, I don't know if he was coordinator, but defensive coach. Yeah, it was coordinator. Mm-hmm. He got carried off the field for the 90 Giants?
Yeah, he was there for both. So
for both of those, right?
Yeah, they won in 86 and then they won in 90. So yeah.
Right.
And whatever guy can coach Lawrence Taylor deserves all the respect in the world.
And then,
right, exactly.
Fact. But then you go to Cleveland, and Bill Belichick had built that team from nothing, because they were a mess when he got there, to a team that was very respected, was 1 yard away from the AFC Championship game before Ernest Byer let that ball just pop out, which I'm sure right now is making all Cleveland Browns fans' ears bleed. But then from there, Cleveland leaves town. It's announced Cleveland's leaving town. He gets screwed out of a job. He gets screwed out of a team that was 1 yard away from the AFC Championship game, and then goes ahead, follows Bill back to New England, follows him to the Jets, and then history is made in 2000 when he's hired by the Patriots.
Yeah, and in that 2000 season, I mean, you talked about it a little bit, Bobby, but I want to bring up the draft, and another guy that we're going to bring up later in this conversation is J.R. Redmond, who was actually selected in the second round by the New England Patriots that year. The 2000 season was an interesting one at 5-11, but you draft Tom Brady. The first time we're going to say his name tonight. I don't know how far into the recording we are, but it's the first time we've said the name Tom Brady. So they draft him 6th round, compensatory pick, 199 overall. 198 guys go before him. Countless quarterbacks, no-name quarterbacks, guys that were out of the league in 5 years. There might have been one that slipped through. But
ready for the names? Chad Pennington, Giovanni Carmazzi, Chris Redmond, T. Martin, Mark Bulger, and Spurgeon Wynn. All drafted before Tom Brady.
Mark Bulger had an okay career.
Mark Bulger had a good career, but I mean, so you had Chad Pennington, Mark Bulger, and then the next guy is Tom Brady. Clearly, Tom Brady was better than the two of those guys combined 10 times over.
Was he?
Right.
Now we know that, but in 2000, they draft this bad body quarterback who
the worst
the worst body. I've always loved that shot of him doing that mug shot and turning in front of the camera in Indianapolis when they in the old RCA Dome when they show him, and it's just like, man, bad body quarterback, and this guy was drafted by the Montreal Expos, and you're like,
he was good too.
He was a good baseball player, but you're like, who is this guy? He backed up Brian Griese at Michigan. Then he got his chance in his senior year. So, but we've now seen over the years what Bill does with these guys. But back then, let's sit in 2000 when we were all young pups, really just coming into our fandom of sports. I mean, I was 12 at the time that he was drafted. So. You didn't know who it was, but you didn't know that they needed a quarterback because Drew Bledsoe was one of the best quarterbacks in the league at the time. And the other two quarterbacks on that depth chart, and I always love this about the 2000 season because Tom Brady didn't dress for a game in 2000.
Fourth string, right? Fourth string.
Drew Bledsoe, Michael Bishop, John Freese.
But that right there to me speaks to Belichick's. Just, I don't know if it's a sixth sense that he has. It's something that dude has. What NFL team do you ever hear carrying 4 quarterbacks? Have you ever heard of an NFL team carrying 4 quarterbacks?
Well, Bill wouldn't be caught dead doing it now. He barely carries 2. But back then he was carrying 3 every season. But you're right, Bobby.
He kept the 4th.
4.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly. And I think that really goes to that. Now, if you remember the quote, you guys watched America's Game too, Brady gets drafted, he's unknown. First of all, I think if we were sports fans back in 2000, as big as we are now, we definitely would have known the name Tom Brady because his career at Michigan was nothing to snub at. You know what I mean? Like, that dude came into a lot of big games, including, I believe it was the Rose Bowl, a 21-point comeback his senior year. And somehow this dude who came in when Brian Griese was failing took over the game and won that Rose Bowl, slipped all the way to the 6th round. Now that to me, to this day, that like I know those body pictures are bad, but I'll never understand that. I'll never understand it.
But now a quarterback does that, and he's drafted in the 1st round.
Right.
And how many guys have we seen over the last 20 years fail in the NFL because that was their claim to fame? Mm-hmm. And now you can almost write it on the wall and say, this guy's going to fail, this guy's not going to do well because he won one game. A lot of times maybe they'll succeed. I mean, there was guys later on in the career, and, you know, we'll get to this as we go through this series, but Matt Castle, he never started a game at quarterback for USC and led the Patriots to an 11-5 season. You know, it can – but to get back to 2000, you're absolutely right, Bobby. I mean, what a pick. And none of us knew what the heck he was doing.
But in my opinion, if this 2000 happens now, Tom Brady is no later with that resume, no later than a 2nd-round pick in today's NFL. There's no way that man with that skill set, that leadership quality, and that track record of leading comebacks and successful football teams falls to the 6th round. That does not happen in today's NFL.
And what's amazing is back then is there was so many good coaches in the league. Like that was kind of the heyday when you had like really good coaches. Mm-hmm. And for that to happen, for him to slip that low, it's amazing. And you know, you look at the pick, and we all know the quotes. He walks into Patriots camp, and he walks into camp, and Robert Kraft walks by him and calls him Kyle Brady. Says, "What's going on, Kyle?" Yep. And Kyle Brady at the time was the tight end for the New York Jets. One of my favorite tight ends. He was just a big body dude that ran through people. But so he calls him Kyle, and Tom turns around and says, "Oh, my name's Tom Brady." And he goes, Robert Kraft says, "Yeah, you're the quarterback. You're pretty good. I've seen you play." And, you know, Tom turns around and says, "Mr. Kraft, I want to thank you. Drafting me was the best decision you've ever made." And little did we know he was right.
Right, and I think that honestly is the perfect place to go ahead and lead into this 2001 season. All right, now we've brought you back exactly to where the Patriots were at this time. Mediocre football team, no expectations going into 2001 season. We have Drew Bledsoe, maybe at the time considered probably the most overpaid quarterback in the NFL. We have a coach who's on the hot seat. And we have a defense and an offense that's just sputtering at all seams. So going into the season, you know, there was no hope for this team. Now, that first moment in the 2001 season where you come in, you know, it's a new season. Everyone's got hope. Week 1, Patriots lose to the Cincinnati Bengals.
Hang on, before we get into this, we can't go over the fact that 6 months earlier, before the season started, one of the best defensive players that ever played in a Patriots uniform was drafted 6th overall.
Yep, Richard Seymour out of Georgia.
Yep.
And Matt Light was also drafted in that draft as well. And say what you want about Matt Light, Tom Brady loved the guy.
Matt Light was a great offensive lineman,
and he's a good person. But I've seen so many people that have said they didn't like Matt Light, and I'm like, hang on a second. Matt Light kept Tom Brady upright for years. Mm-hmm. So I'll let you go back to that. But I mean, we're talking about two of the best picks during that time for the.
No, you're also. Well, go ahead, Mike.
Bill also made a lot of good offseason moves that year with Brian Cox, and I believe he brought in Bucky Jones that year as well, like some veterans just to shore up the defense. Again, now we look at those moves and we're like, those are pillars of that defense. But then it's like, and didn't he bring in Vrabel that year too?
Steelers, yeah, that's right. Yeah. For like a third-round pick, I believe.
Yeah, so he put that entire defense together in that offseason. And looking back now, it's like, wow, that's amazing.
Wow. Here's your notable defensive players on the New England Patriots from 2001. Bobby Hamilton. I always thought he was pretty good. Willie McGinnis, Richard Seymour, Teddy Bruschi, Matt Chatham, special teams guy. I always love Matt Chatham on special teams. Brian Cox, Larry Izzo, another special teams guy. Ted Johnson, Roman Pfeiffer, Mike Vrabel. Those were your linebackers. I literally just read every linebacker on the New England. Like that's
a linebacker squad right there, yeah.
Defensive backs, I mean, they had Terrell Buckley, Antoine Harris, Bucky Jones, Ty Law, Lawyer Malloy, Otis Smith. And then, of course, I mean, your kicker was Adam Vinatieri, who will come into this. But, I mean, Mike, you're absolutely right. I mean, he puts his defense together. And back then it was like, who are these guys?
Who are these people?
But reading those names off, are you kidding me?
Well, and Mike, that's a great point to make, because that would end up becoming the MO and the trend for all of Bill Belichick's time in New England. Every single year, this dude has brought in player after player of people who weren't known, who are disrespected, and they come into New England, and not only do they do good, but they thrive in this system. Yep. And I think that season was the first. Terrell Buckley, to me, was the first one that stood out, because he was in Miami. He was good. He wasn't great. Came to New England, that dude was lights out in the 2001 season. Absolute lights out. And if you remember going to that season, what's funny is the biggest free agent acquisition I can remember was Matt Stevens. You guys remember Matt Stevens? He was a safety. He's a white guy, long hair. Exactly. No. You have no idea who he is.
Not at all.
Right,
but
exactly.
He doesn't even have a picture on Wikipedia.
Right, exactly. But I mean, it's crazy because you named all those linebackers, so which was a great core. The most important linebacker that season didn't even play for the Patriots. He played for the Jets, and we'll get into that. So he was. Mo Lewis, I've joked about this off the air before, but he deserves to be in the Patriot Hall of Fame because, without that hit on Drew Bledsoe, we don't see the impact that 12 makes.
So he also deserves a ring.
Yeah,
he deserves
a ring.
He deserves six. He deserves 6 rings.
If Nomar gets a ring in 2004, Mo Lewis gets a ring in 2001. That's the way I feel about it. So, and I'm going to lead Bobby back into the next part because I'm going to jump off of what Rayshawn just said and kick it back to Bobby here. But so in the 2001 season, after being the 4th string quarterback, and Tom Brady working his butt off because basically he found a notebook in the quarterback's room in 2000 that said he was too slow, and not speed-wise on the field, but he was too slow at reads, too slow at getting rid of the ball, too slow at basically doing everything as an NFL quarterback, which was clearly a setup by Bill Belichick to leave that in front of Tom Brady because he knew what he had in this kid, and it hadn't happened yet. By the 2001 season, the New England Patriots had 3 quarterbacks prior to the start of the NFL season against the Cincinnati Bengals. Drew Bledsoe was your number 1. Tom Brady was your number 2. And Kansas City Chiefs great Damon Huard was the number 3.
Well, also, Damon Huard was the backup for Marino down in Miami, and he did pretty well for himself whenever Marino couldn't make his last couple starts.
That's true.
You look at that room, and we can talk about the Jets game, Bobby. I'm sure you're going to lead us right into that, but I loved Drew Bledsoe. Drew Bledsoe was the reason I became a Patriots fan because they went from nothing to being somewhat relevant because of Bledsoe, Curtis Martin, Terry Glenn, and Coates. That offense was awesome. And, Bledsoe couldn't run. It turns out when he tried, he almost died. But he could throw that ball far, and he was fun to watch.
Right. And what's funny is when you say he almost died, you actually mean that literally.
Yeah.
Which I remember at the time. I remember that was the first game of the season. Everyone was pumped. And I'll never forget being a 12-year-old. And for the first time in my life, I felt a feeling of almost disgust that first week 1. I remember looking at the screen and being like, we're losing to the goddamn Cincinnati Bengals? A team that just drafted Akili Smith, turned down 9 draft picks to draft Akili Smith, and we're losing to them right now. I was disgusted.
And they were nothing after Boomer Esiason left. So
right, and then you go into week 2 against the Jets, completely outmatched. The Jets were a good football team at this point.
We just set the stage. Week 2 against the Jets was not supposed to be that. We were supposed to play the Carolina Panthers, who were 1-0, but because of 9/11,
right?
9/11, the whole season got paused. We ended up playing Carolina at the end. They went from 1-0 to 1-15. But that first game back, we had the whole Andruzzi family because all of his brothers are first responders. Everything after 9/11, and that game, you were amped up, and they came out and just laid an egg. They just absolutely they weren't even amped up for that game, and I just remember the Jets were a good team then. They still were a really good team.
Yeah, they're coming
great.
It was, and they're coming off September 11th, kind of the other direction. I mean, you think about that, and now you look back on things, and when big things happen, national tragedies, international tragedies, sports is what brings people together. And it really did this season. I mean, and we'll get into that as we talk about the Super Bowl later on. But kind of a backstory from me, and Mike mentions it. I remember when they changed this game and they changed the whole season around, and are we going to play? Should we play? And they did. And they switched things around, and they brought the Jets to New England that week. A lot of things were happening, and I was there to kind of give you guys a look into where I'm going to go in this episode. Is that my father's been a season ticket holder since 1981 and been going to games since 1976, and he has lived in New England since 1960. So he's been a Patriots fan since day one, since he was 9 years old. I was at this game. I was at every game that season, including the Raiders playoff game and the Super Bowl. So I remember this game, Mike. I remember coming into it, and I remember the flyover. I remember everything around it. Section 205, row 8. We were right there in the old stadium. And you're right. The Patriots laid an egg, and the Jets were amped up because they were playing for so much more than a win in week 2 of the NFL season.
Right, and that's what made this season start out. That game and that whole situation, which I can't believe that I almost led into this without it, is what made this season so special. You know what I mean? Like without the Patriots that season, 2001 just seems like a completely different year because not only, like you guys said, did it unify Massachusetts, but rooting for the New England Patriots because of what was happening. They were the underdog. They were America's team. They were red, white, and blue. They were all about equality, being together. Made 2001 that's much more special of a year.
I mean, Bobby, you kind of talked about it at the beginning of the show when you said, we're all Patriots and tonight the Patriots are world champions. Like that doesn't mean anything without that. Without 9/11. I mean, for
which
real. I mean,
is a terrible tragedy.
Yeah,
I'm not discounting what you're saying.
We were red, white, and blue. Like
that was it. Right,
America.
In theory, the Giants should have been America's team that year, right? But it just so happened that, as you'll lead us into like down the road, there was just this snowball effect for the underdog, for the red, white, and blue that just kept building and building and building. And I feel like that moment and that day, like I remember watching it on television, like
and Druzy with the flags.
Yeah, like this is special.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
All of it was special, and that was the nice part about the game is before the first whistle, it wasn't about the New England Patriots against the New York Jets. It was about football in the United States of America. It was about American football and bringing everybody together. And I mean, the logo of the Super Bowl, as we'll get into, which is on my shoulder here, it's the American flag in the shape of the United States, and it's what the season became 2 days after the start of the season.
Which, not to get too off topic, but that really does speak to how powerful sports is and really speaks to how much of a unifying factor it is. We see it now with the NBA. We see it with these players protesting. That sports really does have a powerful input on society. And I think 2001 Patriots, again, we'll get into how significant it really was, what led to it being so significant with the Super Bowl, the halftime show, all that stuff. But 2001 is the one season that stands out to me where a sport, one team, one thing, who knew it would be the Patriots? Looking back 20 years ago, if you told people the Patriots were a unifying factor in America, people would lose their mind. But that's what they were. You know what I mean? That 2001 season, they were the underdog. Now, again, I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. So game 2, Drew Bledsoe. So the Patriots, I believe they were losing 3-0 at the time. Drew Bledsoe drops back, and for the first time in his entire career, he decides to scramble out of the pocket. Bad decision, Drew. Bad decision. Should have let your cement feet lock it right in place like they had your entire career, because what was waiting for you on the right sideline? Mo Lewis's shoulder. And he hit him harder than I've ever seen anyone get hit before. There was reports. I was doing my research, and there was reports that I saw of quotes on the Patriots sideline that said they could feel how hard he got hit from 20 feet away. They could feel the impact of that hit.
Yeah,
that
it was
man,
right there. It was right on the sideline. I mean,
he got
it was
walloped.
I remember exactly where it happened. I mean, he got absolutely smoked right in the chest, right where you would think that the pads would protect you.
Right. So at that moment, he gets hit, and I remember thinking, he's all right. He's fine. You know what I mean? He's fine. It was just a hit. He'll get back up. But I don't know if it was the greatness in Tom Brady. I know, Mike, you've mentioned this to me before, but that dude grabbed his helmet, and he knew it was his time. He knew it was time.
If you remember, Bledsoe came out for the next series.
Right. Yep.
I think this is where I don't want to go too off track here, but I have such a love for Bledsoe and an affection for him because there was a quote by Charlie Weiss about the 2001 Patriots, and more specifically about Bledsoe, is that no one wanted to make a play. They thought he was going to do it. They thought Bledsoe would just make the play happen. So no one else is out there, trying to do what they're supposed to do, do your job like Belichick tells us now. They were just waiting for Bledsoe's cue. So if he couldn't do it, it didn't happen. When Bledsoe goes down, you cannot operate that way with Brady or right. Any other quarterback coming in. You all have to play together. So the Patriot way started the minute the Mo Lewis Mack truck ran through Drew Bledsoe.
Absolutely. That's a great point because you could see it. I was watching the game today, and you could see – I know that they ended up losing this game, but they actually ended up having a chance in a game that they played absolutely horrendous football. I remember that they had a Hail Mary that dropped ever so slightly down to the end zone. But that game, as soon as Bledsoe goes out, you see that team unify around each other, and you see that team football that we all came to know and love from 2001 on. Well, I don't love it as much anymore, but you guys definitely do. I can promise you that.
One thing I remember when that hit happened and Bledsoe goes to the sideline, before he came back out for the next series, is watching number 12 run onto the field. And, at the time, maybe a handful of people knew who this kid was. But Tom Brady comes running on the field, and I remember the people around us. I remember the people sitting behind us saying, who the hell is 12? And somebody takes out their binoculars and reads the name on the back of his jersey, and it says Brady. And they say, who the hell is Brady? Who's this guy? And granted, they probably didn't know who Damon Heward was, so it wouldn't have made a difference. But that kind of resonates, going back and thinking about the Patriots over the last 20 years. Who the hell is this guy? Who the hell are these guys? And Tom Brady goes on to throw for 46 yards in that game, 5 of 10 passes for 46 yards. Drew Bledsoe goes to the hospital after the game. Didn't know he was going to need to during the game, but you're right. The Patriots team rallied around each other. The Jets were rallying around each other, and that was that. But I don't know if you guys remember, this was the first time we saw the tuck rule.
Yep.
Which we'll see later on.
Vinny Testaverde.
So Vinny Testaverde fumbles the ball. The Patriots recover, have even more of a chance after playing a terrible game, as Bobby said, and it gets overruled because of the tuck rule, something that Raiders fans will clearly forget come the playoffs. But this was a day that no one knew what was going to happen with this season because everybody thought that Mo Lewis hit on Drew Bledsoe was the end of the season. Mm-hmm. Nobody knew who Tom Brady was. We thought that our guy that just got paid millions, one of the biggest contracts in the NFL, we thought the season was over because that was our guy.
So I was 11 at the time, and I remember, I was a Drew Bledsoe fan. My first football memory was the Super Bowl that we lost against the Packers. So, I remember Desmond Howard just running down the sideline.
Looking up at the jumbo.
Yeah, Reggie White doing whatever you want to do with Gilbert Brown, Leroy Butler, Dorsey Lemons, all those guys. But I remember when Bledsoe went down, and I'm like, oh, man, this is one of my favorite players on the Patriots at the time. And to see him go down, I had the same feeling at 11 years old. I was like, well, they'll be lucky to win, 2 or 3 games.
Right.
And then I remember at the time, I didn't know much about Peyton Manning, but I knew those guys could really score. And then, the season really turns around, with a route.
With that week 3.
Lightly. Yeah, week 3,
The we can do this moment, which Rayshawn, you just mentioned, that first one on the list is that week 3 against the Colts. That week 3 against the Colts, they were unbelievable. I don't know if it was the game prep coming in, just because of, like Mike, you just said, the team aspect, that team, were the Patriots. actually happening and them not relying on Bledsoe so much. But they beat that team mercilessly. David Patton became one of the first players in NFL history to throw, run, and catch for a touchdown. Antoine Smith ran all over the Colts, and I believe the final score was 37-13.
No, I mean, I think Clarke, Peyton Manning. I think they win the same division as the Patriots. Then, right? They was on the AFC East, right? So,
you see things on that real quick is that this was the last year of the AFC East, North, South, and West. Go ahead, Ray.
Right. So so many things that were going into that, but and I think Lloyd Malloy said this on there on the America's Game, but early in Peyton Manning's career, we took care of business against him. Like, yes, he was the system. He became the man eventually. But, early in his career, before 2006, we did whatever we wanted against Indianapolis. And whether it was him throwing an interception, whether it was him getting sacked, we always had him sort of befuddled, so to speak, whenever he came into New England. He was just a different player in outdoor elements. And it really showed that his number. Yeah, always exactly. So it's just he's just someone. Like I said, we had his number early on. So and like I said, that was just a sign of things to come after that game.
I also think that this first game against the Colts, this had nothing to do with Brady. This was not an offensive show at all. This was all defense. It was all those key additions that we talked about, like in the offseason, that came to fruition. I mean, they just knew how to attack Peyton Manning and that entire system. They started hitting the wide receivers on the line. They started hitting the running backs on the line too. And before Peyton could do anything, he was down 20 points. And I think Antoine Smith had almost 100 yards, like 92 yards, but I'm pretty sure he fumbled on the 1 yard line too. Like that wasn't a great offensive game for anybody. The defense just shut them down. And
what else was big about this was the fact that the Colts were 2-0 coming into this game, and the Patriots were 0-2 with Tom Brady in his first start. And Bill Belichick, the guy that he is, the defensive mastermind, to play off what Mike just said, made it happen defensively because he was still teaching the kid how to play and knew exactly, him and Romeo Crennel knew exactly what Peyton Manning was going to do at every turn. And it showed in game 2, which is 3 weeks later.
Yeah, that game 3 is definitely the first nomination for that we can do this moment, because if there's there was no other time prior to in that season where you actually had faith in this Patriots football team to put together any kind of semblance of a winning season. Now, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that you're absolutely right. I remember feeling the same thing. And then they got tripled up by the Dolphins the next week on the road. So, but even to this day, it was always historical that the Patriots had trouble with Miami.
In Miami.
From day 2.
They won. Day 2.
Week 4, Brady looked awful too. He was not good in that game. He did not. He didn't come into fruition until the next week.
That leads us right into week 5 against the San Diego Chargers. Now, this is also going to come up later because this, to me, is the winner of this category. This is the moment that launched the dynasty to me. It launched Brady's career. It launched everything that season. Without this game, none of this happens. Without this game, Bledsoe might come back week 10 and replace Brady, because this game really dictated how the rest of that season was going to go. All right, so we'll set the stage. The Patriots playing the Chargers. Doug Flutie's back in New England. Everyone's excited about that. Patriots go into the third quarter. I believe Antoine Smith scores a touchdown. They go up 16-15 entering the fourth quarter. Within about 4 to 5 minutes, the Patriots, in typical Patriots fashion, give up a awful touchdown. So Lee Johnson fumbles the ball in an inexplicable play, which just described the last Patriots 5 years, where he fumbles the snap. Instead of just going down, he, as a punter, tries to throw the ball. Chargers pick it up, run it back for a touchdown. Patriots down 10 points with about 4 minutes remaining. Now, if that doesn't prove to you that this was the way Patriots football was at that time, the crowd started pouring out. The announcers even brought it up when I was rewatching the game today. They said the Patriots are in trouble and their fans know it. And you see all these fans just out they go.
At halftime, the Patriots led in that game 16-13, and Vinatieri had missed a field goal and an extra point. And Belichick was quoted at halftime saying that was the worst kicking performance he had seen in a year and a half. And he was talking about Lee Johnson. He was talking about Adam Vinatieri. And it was absolutely awful. And you're right. They led, and people were still leaving because it was an absolutely horrid football game.
I also think like that game turned, as we're going to talk about, turned around our franchise. But it also turned around Doug Flutie's career because they were coming into that game 3-1.
Right.
They finished 5-11, and Drew Brees replaced Doug Flutie for the Chargers quarterback. Right. But that entire game, I mean, obviously Lee Johnson is not Tom Chupa. He should not be throwing the football as a punter. That should never happen. But you're down 10. There's 5 minutes left. Historically, 2000, that means that Bledsoe's going to throw 25 more passes. 3 are probably going to be picked off, and you're going to lose by like 26. Brady was so efficient in that next 5 minutes and brought them back. And again, that's why like the whole did Brady win because of the system, or did the system win because of Brady? He just went out there and did what he was supposed to do. He passed it to the open guy. And He didn't try to be a hero. Everyone else on the field tried to make each other better. So I think that's a great nominee for the We Can Do This moment, because until I went back and watched it today, like I forgot how close to the brink of disaster.
Same.
And I agree with Mike because, sorry, Baba, real quick, but right after that, after another great drive by Brady, who kicks the game-winning field goal, Adam Vinatieri.
Adam V. Yep.
Another theme we're going to see.
All right, so we're down 10, right? Again, like you guys said, Brady brings us back. We end up winning the game. Now, that moment right there, like I just said, is my probably top nominee. We'll go over a couple more, but that's my nominee because without that game, the Patriots fall to 1-4. Okay, 1-4 is a record that you don't come back from. There is no playoffs when you start 1-4. Not only that, if they go 1-4, regardless what happens in those next coming weeks, when Drew Bledsoe is healthy, that man is back on the field, and there's no doubt about that. If Tom Brady loses his first 2 out of 3 games as starting quarterback, he's done. That's it. That's the Tom Brady experiment, and we never hear from him again.
I think he would have stayed starting quarterback because I don't know how much trust Bill had in Heward, but you didn't have Bledsoe back at that point, and I mean, but that's definitely. I think you're right. I mean, I think that kind of has to take the cake for regular season because that turned things around. I mean, sure, we're going to talk about how they went 2-3, then they're at a 500 record. They go sub 500 again. They go back above 500. They're 500 again, and then by week 11, what are we talking about? And at week 11, we're cruising.
Week 10 against the St. Louis Rams. This team was unstoppable. This will be the first of a few times that we mentioned the St. Louis Rams on this podcast. They were the best football team in the NFL by far. It wasn't even close. It wasn't even close, right?
Marshall Faulk was the best. I hate to say this. Marshall Faulk was my favorite player in the NFL at that moment. Like
I'm pretty sure you had a Marshall Faulk jersey, bro. I remember you wearing that thing all the time, man.
Do you know how many people had 28 St. Louis Rams jerseys?
Yeah.
I mean, so many people. I mean,
he was phenomenal, man. And then, you had Torrey Holt, Isaac Bruce, Ricky Prohl, Roland Williams, like
Isaiah
Hakeem, like who was just, was just a speed burner in the slot, man. And Kurt Warner. I mean, so they really were an offensive machine. And I remember looking, I'm like, yo, like if we can score maybe 15 points, like that's a win. But like they're gonna put up 30.
Right, and that was definitely the mindset going in. Like we all said before, this team was so good that it would have been an absolute win if the Patriots stayed within 10, 14 points of this team. It would have given us that feeling that, okay, we can hang with the big boys. They did more than that.
They had – I'm looking at the Rams roster from 2001, and, man, it's no wonder we lost to them in Week 10. I mean, but we gave them a run. Like, we gave them a run. And the thing about that Rams team, and we're going to see it later on, is how cocky this team was. Good. They had Mike Martz. I mean, he was one of the best coaches. You could really say he's one of the best coaches of all time. I mean, he's probably top 10. You look at Mike Martz, you look at how cocky this team was, how confident they were. They were, I mean, you're talking about a fast, quick, and those are two very different things, fast, quick offense that who is going to stop him? And Kurt Warner was such a big body, but he was an Arena League guy. I mean, the guy was bagging groceries before he signed with the St. Louis Rams. And he comes in there and he picks up this Mike Martz offense like it's nothing. And he's got speed, he's got slot receivers, he's got deep guys, he's got good tight ends, and an offensive line that Drew Bledsoe would have killed for.
Oh, my. Yeah, he would have.
And Ricky Prohl was he was kind of the first of that new age. I know Steve Largent played for the Seattle Seahawks back in the day, but Ricky Prohl was like that slot guy that, you know, the Edelmans and the Welkers of the world kind of modeled themselves after the season. I mean, this team should have been unbeatable. They lose 24-17. They stay within 7 points of these guys in Week 10. And granted, it dropped them to 5-5 after the loss. But I mean,
it didn't matter at that point. It didn't matter.
Oh no, it didn't. And that's what we can say looking back on it. Like it really didn't. I mean, what happened over the next 7 weeks, you know?
Right.
Well, this game for me, why I wanted to nominate it as like the moment that I knew is because a couple of things to take away from this, right, is that Kurt Warner and that offense were unstoppable, right? So logic would dictate that your goal as a defensive coordinator would be to attack Kurt Warner. They did that in this game, but they did not do it in their rematch, and that's probably why they won. They went after Marshall Faulk in the Super Bowl, right? But in this game, Warner still went 30 for 42, 400 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 picks, one for I think one was returned by Tabucky Jones, right, for an interception. And like this game, like it just for some reason, and I know we were 5-4, but it never felt out of hand. Like we always felt like we were within striking distance. And Brady again had like I think he went like 19 of 26 for like under 200 yards, right? He didn't have a great performance, but I mean, the defense showed up. And, you know, when you lose only by 7 to probably the greatest offensive team that we've seen up until that point, I think it just gave Bill a lot to look, a lot of film to review and say, okay, well, we were this close. What's the one thing we should do differently?
And at this time, when you're looking at the best offensive team, the Patriots were slowly becoming one of the best defensive teams in the league. And Mike Martz even said that after this game, that the Patriots were a Super Bowl caliber team. Little did he know. But I mean, you look back and talk about Week 3 against Indy, 44-13. Sure, they lose to Miami 30-10. They beat San Diego in overtime 29-26. Then they wallop the Colts again 38-17. They lose by 11 to the Denver Broncos. But then they beat up on the Atlanta Falcons 24-10. They beat up on the Buffalo Bills 21-11. And then you lose by 7 to the best offense in the NFL.
And not only that, but Bill Belichick, for the first time in the Rams, since they became the show on turf, had an actual game plan to slow that offense down. That's something that not many people before that had done it. You see it in the tape. Slants and in cuts. That's the game. Slants and in cuts. Slants and in cuts. Right, exact. That statement right there set the tone for that team and the rest of that season, because the players say it too from all the interviews. Walking off that field, they knew they had something. Yeah. Whether it was Brady, whether it was Bledsoe, walking off that field, they knew that team could compete at the highest level against the highest competition the NFL had to offer.
Well, because we're also going to see with the rest of the season, and we kind of saw it before, that besides the Cincinnati Bengals in Week 1, and they had another loss to the Broncos and the Dolphins, but no one else in the AFC East at this point in the season, where they had come from and where they are now. Tom Brady is now firing on all cylinders. He's the starter. There's no question.
Right. Exactly.
Nobody in the AFC East was going to stop them.
And that I believe it was after that game that Bledsoe was actually cleared to play. And Belichick made the most controversial decision. He put his career, he put that team on the back of Tom Brady because he saw something. All right. They may have lost that game, but something Yeah.
Remember the press conference. I get paid to make the best decisions for the football team.
TEAM.
As in team football team. We're going to go with Tom, and that's what Mr. Clarke pays me to do. So that's what we're going to do. It was spot on because now I was the news was going back and forth about Brady, Bledsoe. Now I still wanted Bledsoe to come back. It's easy to say that's when he's like, you should have wanted Brady. I still thought if Bledsoe is on there, the way Bledsoe can sling it. Now that the defense is getting better, Drew, take us there. You took us there before. Take us home. Which we're gonna get to that. But take us home. Take us home, Drew. You got us. But like I said, Bill had the foresight to say, you know what, the continuity is starting to grow. The defense is growing. I see some in this young guy. Let's see if he can take us to the promised land.
You weren't alone on that either. That was most of New England, man. Yeah. Most of New England was on that boat that they wanted Bledsoe back.
I also think, on that note, this is why people that are Patriots fans and have been since Drew Bledsoe love him still so much is because we saw the awful quarterback controversy that happened in Buffalo where Flutie got ousted, right? Bledsoe could have made this really ugly. And instead he said, obviously, I want to be out there, but I'm going to do whatever I need to do to make sure that our team wins.
And that's why, and you're right, that's why we love him to this day. When Drew Bledsoe comes back to New England, yeah, sure, Mo Lewis might deserve a ring, but Drew Bledsoe earned his 10 times over that season because he took the backseat. He had the big contract. We all know that he landed in Dallas afterwards, but he did what he needed to do, and that was the biggest thing that an NFL player has ever done, especially in this day and age. Now, with these guys, that is one of the biggest things because, Mike, you hit the nail on the head. He could have made it ugly. My job, why are you paying me if I'm just going to sit on the sideline? And Bledsoe and Brady knew what they had together, and they had a phenomenal relationship. And Tom Brady pays homage to Drew Bledsoe so many times in America's game, but he also does it throughout his career. Whenever Drew comes back, Tom goes out of his way to find Drew on the sideline and not a lot. You don't see quarterbacks do that anymore. We all know how Brett Favre treated Aaron Rodgers,
or how Brady treated Jimmy Garoppolo,
treated Jimmy Garoppolo. Yeah. So take a note out of your own your own notebook there, Tommy. But it's amazing how it all went, and it almost makes it even more perfect looking back on it, how this is one of the best seasons, and we're only halfway through talking about it.
Yeah. Right, and that's the thing that because I'm gonna be honest, if I was Drew, I'd have been flipping things all over that locker room. I'm going off at Bill, I'm going off at Rob, I'm going off at Charlie Weiss. Whoever's in my way, you're catching it. Because the competitor in me is I'm the best guy for this job. I'm the guy that got you there before, and I can get you there again. So it took an incredible amount of humble pride.
So you're saying Drew Bledsoe is a bigger man than you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And,
literally and figuratively.
Right, you're absolutely right. I think we all would.
Oh, my God. What? So, like I said, thank you, Drew, for being so humble because, you helped change the landscape of our franchise forever. So thank you, Drew. We can't say thank you enough. But yeah, like I said, definitely a bigger man than me because I'd have went off completely.
Before we move on, Bobby, the one last thing I want to say is about this, because I think after we all said and done, this is the moment. That locker room was split. It was 50-50. It was Brady and it was Bledsoe. Bledsoe had the money, he had the stats, it was his job, and he did what was best for that team by not fighting and not complaining and just saying, I'll do whatever you need me to do to help get this guy ready. I still get chills just even talking about it.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I know we're supposed to pick a game for this, and I know we don't necessarily. But this category right here, you're absolutely freaking right. Drew is cleared after this game. They lose by 7 to the St. Louis Rams. At the time, we had no idea what any of this meant. None whatsoever. We got to stay in the time capsule. What's going to happen? But Bill comes out and tells us what's going to happen. Done. And that's what we loved most about Bill, and still, well, now a lot of people hate most about Bill. But that's what I love most about Bill is not only does he make the decision, but he's a master motivator.
At the time, we didn't love Bill for this decision, okay? At the time, people thought he was out of his damn mind for picking Tom Brady over Drew Bledsoe. Out of his mind.
People wanted him to lose his job because they said, well, look at what did he do in Cleveland? He's not an offensive guy. How does he know what he's talking about?
What went on behind the scenes, though, is something that none of us will ever know. The conversations that he had with Bledsoe to get that man to put his ego behind him and coach Tom Brady like he did, because without Drew Bledsoe, there is no 2001 season. You see that rapport. Even in the preseason before everything starts, you see Bledsoe and Brady together. What are your favorite routes? What do you like? You just want to throw the ball because you want to get on TV, especially the route that Brady said he liked, for the record. That's even more foreshadow for later. But that fade in the corner, beautiful.
Bledsoe also talked about it in his 30 for 30. He said, Bill came to me and said, I'm going to go with Tom. I understand, if it upsets you, but I think this is the best decision for football. And Drew said, I think Bill expected me to flip out, but I just looked and said, what do you need me to do to keep him ready? That's just the guy.
Another reason why we love when he leaves his winery in Walla Walla, Washington, and comes to New England. Actually, I think he's in Montana now. But regardless, that's why we love him when he comes back. But you're absolutely right, Mike, and that's what gets me fired up, because I know what Bobby's about to go into, and I'm looking at the schedule and the scores right now, and I'm just like, can we just get to the next part of the season? Because
we're going.
Because I think we've all decided that Rams game is that moment.
It is the moment
where we were like, we can do this, because not only did we have a kid that was figuring out how to play quarterback on the fly, but we had a coach that told you how it was going to be. He didn't beat around the bush. He motivated his team, and he got his multi-million-dollar quarterback to sit on the bench and teach a kid. He basically had a glorified quarterback coach who is still at the top of his game to help lead this team.
Right. So then from there, all right, we have a great game against the Rams. We stay in with the best team in the NFL. And then the Patriots just catch absolute fire from there, all right? So they beat the Saints 34-17, absolutely dismantle them. Beat the Jets 17-16. Now, this is the point in the season where the Patriots do take the lead in the AFC East for the first time. After this, they do not look back. There were 7-5 at that point. Then they play the Browns. Again, dismantle them. The Browns at this time were actually not a bad football team. They were okay. They had a pretty good defense.
They finished 9-7 that season.
Right. They weren't bad. Yeah. So then they go ahead and they play the Bills 12-9. They beat them in overtime. Again, dominating the AFC East like they do for years to come. They get revenge against the Dolphins, and then they beat the Panthers, which was that rescheduled game from earlier in the season. Now, this is a late addition to one of those moments that I think deserves inclusion, because they didn't just beat the Carolina Panthers, they absolutely dismantled that team. Granted, that was a really bad Panthers team, but going into the playoffs in a game that really didn't matter for the Pats, actually at that point it did, because they got the clinch home field advantage for that. But going into that game, they absolutely dismantled. 38-6 they beat the Panthers that day.
Yeah, 38-6, and Matt Little was the quarterback, and they had Chris Winkie on that team.
Chris Winkie, Heisman Trophy winner. Chris Winkie. Yeah.
Just remember that the Panthers started out 1-0, and then they lost 15 games in a row.
They did. And this was also when the NFL made sense, and the Patriots had a bye week in week 16.
Yeah, who knows what would have happened though if, obviously, again, not 9/11, but let's say that game isn't rescheduled. They play Panthers week 2. It's Bledsoe. Now the Panthers are 2-0. That could have changed that entire season too, right? So theirs
could have changed ours.
Yeah, I just think everything. It's so weird when you look back at it like we had, because over the last couple of days since we finalized this show, I've just watched the games, and it's like, man, if just one thing went differently, just one in the entire season, the whole thing falls apart.
Let's start at the beginning. You're right. If those games don't get rescheduled and they play the Panthers, we may not be having this conversation.
Yeah.
There may not be a 2001 Patriots Super Bowl. we'll get to all the other
dynasty,
ones.
Right?
There may not be anything. I mean, Drew Bledsoe could have still been the quarterback, and Tom Brady could have been shipped off to San Francisco.
Oh, right. Mo Lewis wasn't on the Panthers. That's all I'm saying.
So we go back to the end of the regular season. The Patriots just go on a 7-game winning streak to go into the playoffs. They get a bye week, and the unthinkable happens. The Patriots get a playoff game at Foxborough Stadium in the last game ever of the stadium.
Right.
Now, that definitely adds to the lore of this next game, and that is the Tuck Rule game. Everyone remembers this game. It's a game that went down in NFL history, changed the fate of 2 franchises that couldn't have gone in opposite directions from them, and probably maybe the most controversial game, besides maybe the Fail Mary, of the last 20 years in the NFL. Would you guys agree with that?
The snowball, baby. Yeah. Loved every minute of it.
Absolutely. And I would say, like, the long-term changes to the franchises was what happened, because short-term, the Raiders go on the next year to make the Super Bowl.
And I was just about to say that. That's,
that team was good.
Rich Gannon was unreal. You still had an older Jerry Rice, Tim Brown, Jay Porter. Yeah,
Charlie Gardner.
Shane Leckler, the best punter in the history of the NFL.
Yeah, Janikowski was still a really good kicker at that time. So it's like, come on, like
drinking beer before the games.
Right, my kind of guy.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, if you don't know what we're talking about the playoff game against this was the divisional round against the Oakland Raiders at Foxborough Stadium, which was incredible. I mean, it just everything about this game, and I'll tell a couple stories on this one, but everything about this game was just amazing. From the moment you woke up that day and you got ready for an 8 p.m. game with the NFC game before it, it was just this day was just they win or lose. This day was awesome because it was the last game ever at Foxborough Stadium, and we didn't know what was going to happen next.
Thank God, by the way. But yeah, Mike, what were you going to say? Foxborough Stadium was a dump.
Like, think about. I mean, when you think about like this game for everybody, obviously, like, we know what it did for the Patriots, but this game altered the trajectory for John Gruden. He's no longer. He's out, right? Raiders didn't fall apart after the next season, but for me, it's like when you look at if you're on the Patriots sideline and you look across, and now you're playing a playoff game in January, and Jerry fucking Rice is on the opposing sideline. Mm-hmm. That's enough to scare me. Like, you are looking at a guy who has won it all with Montana, with Rice, and now is on the verge of doing it again. And the game almost got out of hand. That Tuck Rule, had it not happened to the Patriots, I don't think Belichick would have known with the amount of confidence that he did that it wasn't a fumble, right? Like, there was again, if that doesn't happen in the Jets game in week 2, mm-hmm. like, we're not even talking about this in the divisional game. So, we already did the category about like the moment you knew, but like this game, it was nut cutting time for the Patriots, and they just stayed. They never ever stopped.
Right, and that's what kind of stood out against the past Patriots history that we had seen, is that exactly that they didn't stop. They were down in that game. That game, even before that Tuck Rule happened, the Patriots had already clawed back into that great game on the Brady rush, which is one of the best pictures I've ever seen. Him spiking the ball into 4 feet of snow and not even being able to stand on his feet. He was so pumped.
Yep.
Going into that drive, that was supposed to be Brady's moment. We were ready for it, and then all of a sudden, Charles Woodson takes a blitz off the right side, hits Brady from behind, and let's be honest, guys, he fumbled the ball. He fumbles the ball. Yes, he
didn't.
So,
by rule, he didn't fumble the ball.
No, by rule, he did not fumble. And Belichick and Brady instantly knew. That's like, if you go back and watch America's game, they never even questioned it was a fumble, those two. Everyone else was like, well, what could happen? The fans were going nuts.
Well, actually, no. Brady was kind of so about it. I remember being devastated personally, because I was like, oh my God, like, I can't believe, like, we got this close. Like, we've had a magical year, and just like that, it could be over. But thankfully that happened. So maybe Bill was probably the only person in in the in the stadium that knew, but I think Brady was kind of 50-50. Like I said, he said it on the documentary himself. Like, I don't think it was so clear cut as we came to know it. But thank God that it was something that we that it ruled in our favor, and end up winning the game behind that.
One thing that Bill Belichick has always known, and probably longer than he was ever the coach of the New England Patriots, is he knew the ins and outs of the rule book from top to bottom. And as Mike mentioned, probably went to the official and said, wait a minute, this happened to us. This literally happened to us. And I'm not saying we need this to go our way, but what I'm saying is whoever you're talking to, because this was really when reviewing plays came to the forefront. This was kind of one of the things that this is when the NFL looked at it and said, oh shoot, maybe we should start looking at these things.
And at that point, wasn't that was a ref review too? Belichick didn't even challenge that. Right. Did they even have the capability to challenge at that point, or was it just the refs at that point?
I think didn't the Patriots call a timeout?
Yeah.
Yes.
And Belichick went and asked for it. And I remember this being a long review. I mean, this took a long time, but it was partially because Belichick was in the ear of the official the entire freaking time. So, I mean, he gets in the ear of the official. He starts talking to him about rule book, and they go and look. And, Bobby, we got to bring you back to 2001 and get you out of Dallas for a second. That is not a fumble. And I get why you would say
although it is now.
It is.
Yeah, that's what I meant. It is now.
It is now because they've changed the rule. But in the 2001 season, the way the rule was written,
it was not.
It's not a rule because he was pulling the ball down and giving himself up essentially. So that's basically what the ruling was. So you go into this game and you look at this, and again, this is one of my favorite games of this entire season, and not because it was the last game, but because of everything I remember from this day. And it's just, Mike's absolutely right. When you look across that sideline and you see Jerry Rice and you see Tim Brown, and that was a good team. I mean, You're talking about the Rams being a good team. The Patriots beat two really good teams this playoffs to get to the Super Bowl. I mean, and not only that, we're going to get to the Pittsburgh game in a moment, but I mean, what a tale of two different weather patterns too. I mean, this game, and I got to share this story because it's one of my favorite, and I got a few coming for the playoffs, but I was 13 at the time. We were sitting in the parking lot. I remember watching the Eagles play the Packers in the NFC divisional round on this tiny little TV we had set up in the car. And I was with my father and my godfather and one of their friends, and they all got up and went to the bathroom. And at the time they got up to go to the bathroom, I was sitting in a lawn chair with a blanket over me, no snow. They come back not 15 minutes later, I have 2.5 inches of snow on me. That's how hard that snow was coming down that day. And it was fluffy. It was cold. It was fluffy snow. And that day was brutal. And this was a night game, so it was just getting colder. And it snowed all night long.
From beginning to end. Yep.
From beginning to end.
Never stopped.
And we're literally talking all day. And there's only been one other game that I've been to where it's been snowier than that game, and that was against Miami in 2006. But this Raiders game, I mean, you're talking about the snow, the cold. You get into the stadium, you see Jerry Rice, you see Tim Brown, you see, as Rayshawn said, Rich Gannon, who was one of the best quarterbacks in the league at the time, which is amazing to say now. And it's amazing because I look at it, it says game weather, 19 degrees, heavy snow. Jesus.
Yeah, the heaviest of snows.
Walt Coleman was the official. He's still an official today. He's out there on his little scooter. Let's go back to the tuck rule. And they call the tuck rule, which sets up a drive for Brady. He didn't have to get him far because he was already in Oakland territory at the time. So they figure out what the heck's going on. Woodson's going nuts. I'll never forget Charles Woodson on the sideline. I'm saying, like, Gruden and his teammates had to hold him back. He was absolutely livid that this ball was given back to the Patriots. And while it wasn't a fumble, I don't blame him. I don't blame him for the emotion. The day, what was happening in the game, the weather, the way it was going. And that really it changed everything.
Right, and you were there, so you didn't hear it live. But Gino's soundbite for that fumble is definitely one of the best sound bites in Patriots history. How Homer he is for that entire time. Everything that happens in that sequence will go down in Patriots history. You just hear, well, all right, Patriots keep the ball. Nothing better. So they go down. Vinatieri kicks at that moment one of the best field goals. I can't even imagine what this must have been like live, Joe. So you definitely have to go into that. But that's one of the most impressive kicks I've ever seen in my entire life. 47 in the snow against the wind?
42.
Is that right? 42?
42.
Still.
Because he had two 40-plus yard field goals in that game. And, you're right. I mean, you sit there and you see them get the ball back, and now you're like, all right, this can happen. And they come downfield again. They didn't have to go down far, but they call a timeout. The Patriots called a timeout before this, and the only reason they called a timeout, and of course during this season, all you can hear is all the old guys in the stands. Oh, it's 1982 all over again. They're going to bring out the snowplow. They're going to get the field ready for John Smith. The Patriots are going to win the game. And that's exactly why they called the timeout, and that was to get everybody. And you saw Ty Law, you saw Lawyer Malloy, guys that were not on the special teams crew out there clearing snow off the natural surface at Foxborough Stadium to give Ken Walter a perfect spot to put this ball down because Lee Johnson was no longer the punter.
I wonder why.
It was that chart. It's funny. Vinatieri kicks the game-winning field goal, and Bill's like, you're good. Lee Johnson, you're out of here.
Yeah.
But they gave him the best patch of grass that they could find in Foxborough to allow Adam Vinatieri to kick this game-tying field goal. And it was literally magical. And actually, the game winner was not 40-plus yards. It was 23. But the
game winner was short, yeah.
The game winner was short. But this one was 45 yards with 27 seconds left. And, I mean, it changes in overtime because I'm reading the recap and I'm remembering it as it happens. But the one in overtime, it wasn't as many people clearing snow off. I wonder if the snow got a little light. It was just Walter and Vinatieri. I think at that point everybody was like, you got it, dude.
Yeah, 23, you're good. He just kicked it a mile into a blizzard, and right. He did it successfully. And like that kick, I think aside from the next big kick that we're going to talk about, I think this one is the greatest kick that I've ever seen because we had not seen anything like that before in New England. Everything in terms of the weather was stacked against him. I mean, there's no plausible explanation as to why he made that kick, and I never saw the ball come down. I mean, it just went.
You couldn't see the ball come down.
It just went straight, and then that sets up for overtime where I think Brady's binky was Wiggins that entire game. Check down to Jermaine Wiggins. Check down to Wiggy.
Jermaine Wiggins will tell you that too.
Yep. For sure. And that's right. He's definitely one of my biggest nominations, which we'll get to at the end after talking about everything, for that unsung hero. Because Jermaine Wiggins came up huge time and time again in this playoff run, and this game was no shortage. You're definitely right there. Now they win that game. And like Joe, like we all said, most impressive kick we've ever seen in an entire life. I still can't imagine what it was like to see in person, because seeing it on TV was absolutely surreal to see that ball not even soaring. It was an absolute bullet cutting through the snow.
And what's interesting about Vinatieri is you have to understand who Adam Vinatieri is. And if you ever get the chance, whether you're listening to this or one of the five of us, go and listen to Pat McAfee talk about what his time was like in Indianapolis. When he got drafted, his second phone call was from Adam Vinatieri. And Adam Vinatieri sent him to Holder's School. Basically sent him to Holder's School to learn how to hold the ball properly for field goals. And guess who the camp was run by?
Was it Walter?
Ken Walter. Ken Walter ran the camp because Ken Walter told Pat McAfee, you've seen what this guy has done in his career. And if you're not perfect, it's your fault. He'll miss kicks. He will miss kicks. But if you don't hold it perfectly, that's going to be on you. So and that's how Vinatieri was even back then. And Vinatieri will give Ken Walter so much credit for everything he did during his career. And rightfully so, because Ken Walter, I loved Ken Walter myself. But, you're absolutely right, Bobby. I mean, the game-winning field goal against the Raiders, it's not as impressive as the 45-yarder in the middle of a blizzard into the wind. I mean, it's really not. But, I mean, man, this game is where I personally knew, like, if you watch the Rams game in Week 10, this win right here, that 23-yard field goal went through, and my 13-year-old mind said, this team can't be stopped.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, that the overtime kick obviously, like, quote-unquote, meant more, but it really didn't. If you really think about it, don't think with your brain, but think with, like, your heart and your gut, that time kick, that 45 or 47-yard bomb, the minute that he kicked it, you knew it went through, and you knew that there's nothing that the Raiders could do in that game that was going to make them win. It was over. It killed them. It defeated them instantly.
And this game is exactly one of the reasons why this podcast exists. You think about this game, there's so many memories, there's so many feelings, there's so many things that go into this game, and it's exactly why we created this. Memories like Joanne Druzzi making a snow angel in the snow after they win this game. Tom Brady falling face first into the snow. The tuck. The Raiders being absolutely dejected on the sideline. There's so many feelings and emotions that made this game just to this day. There hasn't been a game to me personally. I mean, granted, with being a Cowboys fan, I haven't had emotions like this in a football game in a very long time. That's exactly why this was created, for games just like this, because that game was so awesome. It's something that talking about it or experiencing it once just wasn't enough. Like, that was my favorite part about doing all this research. Everything we did was rewatching that football game because it was snow football, and it was one of the best football games I've ever seen in my life.
Also, if there was one stadium that did not deserve such a great send-off, it was Foxborough Stadium.
It was worst stadium in the league, and worst stadium in the country.
They tapped it and it fell down. They were just like, down.
And Bobby, to go back to what you just said about the Patriots and this game being the best in history. I mean, we think about what we've seen in the last 20 years. We see what we've seen most recently, and this game is why so many games in the last 20 years have meant so much, because there's never been anything like this. I've never felt emotion about another Super Bowl. 2007, but we won't talk about it.
It's a different emotion.
It's a different emotion.
It's a different show.
Yeah. It is a different show. It's elation. It is absolute euphoria of holy crap. They literally can do this. They've done the unthinkable at this point. What nobody thought they could do. They've turned around a 5-11 season. They've won a playoff game at home in the snow against a great coach and a great team. And I know we've had some great moments since then. I know we've had the best comeback in Super Bowl history. I know we've won 5 more after this, but getting back in the capsule and going back, I've never felt emotion about the games we're about to get to, these last 2 games of the 2001 season. I've never felt these emotions about any other game, any other Super Bowl the Patriots have won. Let me put it this way. I've never felt so strongly than this one.
Joey, I can hear it, man. I can literally hear it in your voice right now. And I completely agree with you in that first feeling of Boston triumphant almost, because up until this point, we had known nothing but failure, which kind of is what makes this game so special, because it was that first moment in Boston history where we were like, holy shit. This actually just happened to us. Like, we actually caught a break. We actually got that call. We actually hit that game-winning field goal instead of something awful happening at the last second that makes us fall to our knees and cry. It was actually a happy, memorable Boston sports moment, which is what makes it go down in history.
This launches so much in the last 20 years. This season launches so much for the 4 major sports teams in Boston. Rayshawn, you're like ready to bust over there.
Right. So I mean, I was obviously I'm in my house doing the same Snow Angel on my getting rug burns in my mother's house. She's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, no,
I have to correct Bob. Ray, I got to correct Bob. It was Lonnie Paxton.
Yeah, it was Lonnie Paxton.
Lonnie Paxton, that's right.
Lonnie Paxton,
that's right.
Yeah, because he did it for both. But yeah, excuse me. Like I was like, get off my rug, whatever. And I'm like, they won. They really won. Like I can't believe they won. But then like a day later, reality hit. It was like, oh, we're facing Pittsburgh. Bettis. My non-favorite, other non-favorite Patriot player, Cordell Stewart, aka Slash.
Man.
In Missouri, Jason Gilden. I don't know if Joey Porter was on that team yet, but they had some guys, and I'm like, man, like, for when my mom told me about the Steelers at the time, because she was a kid in the 70s, the Steelers were football, royalty. And it's just like, because she was telling me about Mean Joe Green and Elsie Greenwood and Lynn Swan and I want to say John Taylor. That's Terry Bradshaw.
And TB12.
The original.
The original one, yeah. And so I was like, man, I'm like, well, how are we going to beat these guys? Thankfully we did. So I think we should get into that.
Right. No, for sure. Go ahead. No, go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
I just have one thing, because I think we talked about, like, we've all said, like, this win was the win that, like, is the most important one for all of us over the next 20 years of the Patriots. And I think the reason that it is because every game after this, because of this game, we had the belief that we could win. Mm-hmm. Right? And even if the odds were stacked, even if it was the worst weather, that you were going against perennial Hall of Famers, it did not matter. The Patriots can win. And when they didn't, that's when we would all be like, oh, that they choked this game. It's because of this. It's because of the snowball that we all had that belief.
Yeah, agreed.
Which is also amazing, because the next game we're about to talk about was sunny and 50 degrees in the middle of January in Pittsburgh.
Right. Which we just write in. So with the Steelers, that team, Rayshawn, to go back. So this was their lineup. This was a phenomenal Steelers football team. All right. Starting quarterback, Cordell Stewart. Bill Cowher, coach. Running back, Jerome Bennis. They're 2 wide receivers, Plaxico Burress and Hines Ward. This is when Plaxico Burress was a 23-year-old athletic freak wide receiver. So he wasn't just a possession end zone guy. He was, when it got to 2007, this was the athletic. And then the defense, Rayshawn, you were right. Joey Porter was there. Casey Hampton, Earl Holmes, Chad Scott, Kendrell Bell, Dwayne Washington, Lee Flowers. This team was stacked. So stacked that they knew they were going to the Super Bowl. So much so that the entire team, family, coaches, everyone involved in that organization packed their bags.
They had
their tickets,
reservation.
They had everything ready. And Bill Belichick, because the genius he is, used this to his advantage, like he would do. Again, this is something we've stated, right? Something we've stated so many times in this podcast. Something that has happened so many times over the course of this dynasty. It's funny when you look back on it and you see all those things that he did in that first season that they won this Super Bowl, that he continues to do, and he has always done, which is what has made him that coach, and that's use people's confidence and cockiness against them.
I think after the hardest week of preparation for a team that Bill Belichick could have possibly put on his own players for another team, he started off the Saturday meeting. I'm pretty sure it was either he began it or he ended it with, just to let you know, the Pittsburgh Steelers players are going to be planning on staying at this hotel. Their family and all of their friends will be flying in on this day to this hotel. Just thought you guys should know that.
Yeah, just information that was important.
If I was a player, I would have been livid.
And they were.
Yeah.
And that's what's the best about this is that, I'm a big fan of John Gruden. I'm a big fan of Bill Cowher. I'm a big fan of Mike Martz. I mean, not only did we run through three of the best teams with players, speaking like player personnel wise, these were three of the best coaches in the NFL at the time. Yeah. Like, these are dudes. Like, we're not talking about some dumb coach. I had another word, but I'm going to leave it alone.
NSFW, come on.
We're talking about three of the best coaches in the NFL at the time, and none of them counted the Patriots in. I mean, Oakland probably had their ticket punched to Pittsburgh because the Patriots were the 2 seed, the Steelers were the 1 seed. They probably had their tickets punched to go to Pittsburgh. They were ready to go, but guess what? Now the Patriots, as Mike just said, the Patriots are telling everybody that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to New Orleans for the Super Bowl.
Right. And that game wasn't that close, to be honest. They beat the Steelers pretty handily. You know what I mean? There was a couple moments in there, which we'll get to in a second, but they beat them pretty good, and they handled a lot of adversity in that situation too, which brings me right to my next point, which Tom Brady in this game, I believe it was second quarter, goes down with an ankle sprain. All of a sudden, guess who's coming in?
All of a sudden, we think it's all over.
Like it's a storybook.
I remember I was at my aunt's house watching the television, and I remember the way that Brady fell. And he was laying with his leg bent, and it was underneath, his ankles was underneath that player. And I was like, oh my God.
This can't be happening. This can't be happening.
But it wasn't. It can't be happening. It was, of course, this is happening. Of course, this is happening. After that Oakland game, after what we saw, after how we felt, that triumphant feeling that we finally got. All of a sudden, we were being punched right in the gut again, and we were going to be losers. Boston was going to be at the bottom on the front page of the sports page again, saying Patriots blew it. But guess what?
Walks Drew Bledsoe.
But guess what?
Forget Super Cam. It's Super Drew.
Right. That's not what happened. All right. Drew Bledsoe comes off the bench, and Joe, I'm sure you have the stats up in front of you, but he lights up the Steelers in that second half, and he throws in what goes down in Patriots history as one of the best fade route passes I have ever seen in my entire life. That pass to Patton was there was no one else that could have caught that pass. He put it in the only spot that he could have, and that's what won them that game, and it made Bledsoe actually get his storybook portion of this season.
However, before that, Bledsoe starts scrambling to his right, runs to the sideline, and gets walloped in a Mo Lewis Jr. type hit. And every Patriot fan out there was like gasping. And what does Bledsoe do? He jumps up, slaps guys on the shoulder pads, and it was like, let's
back on the
let's
field.
go. And I was like,
Drew, at home going, here comes Damon Heward.
Right. But the look on Drew's face, you're like, he's not playing. He's not playing.
Right, exactly. And that's, I remember I was like, yeah, Drew, let's go, Drew. And then, but the play that I was at my grandma's house, but the play that I remember the most really wasn't the Patton touchdown.
I know where you're going.
It was a Troy Brown.
Punt
return. When he hit that, I said,
right up the middle. Right up the middle.
And he was gone.
I was like,
right up the middle.
I said, we're going to New Orleans. It's over. Like, I was like, yo, because I was like, wow. When he scored, I was like, oh yeah, that's it. Set him home.
Before you go, Joe, that again, it attests to how good that coaching staff was, because coming into that game, they knew the soft spot of that Steelers special team was straight up the middle.
Yep.
They knew if Troy Brown got 5 steps and the blocks got set up the middle of that punt return defense, it was all over. He was gone, and he sure was.
This was the next moment where not only did I know we were going to the Super Bowl, sorry, as I knocked my mic over, I knew I was going to the Super Bowl. So we, my father actually had tickets for the 96 Super Bowl against the Packers. I was 8 years old at the time, and he was like, we can't do this. We sold them. So I told him, I said, in 2001, I remember leaving the Raiders game. I said, Dad, if we win this lottery again, man, we got to go. Like, we got to go. And he said, yes, right there and then there. No question. And I was like, hell yeah. And that kick, he walked up behind me. Troy Brown runs into the end zone. I remember it like it was yesterday. Walks right up to me, puts his hand on my left shoulder and says, we're going to New Orleans. Not the Patriots, us. Yeah. And I was like, hell yeah. Like, I'm a 13-year-old kid about to go to the Super Bowl. Like, win or lose, this is going to be freaking awesome. Like, I'm going to get to see my team play in the Superdome in the Super Bowl.
Dude, that's an unreal feeling that I can't even imagine, Mike. I'm sure you're about to say the same exact thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say I couldn't even begin to imagine what would be going through my head if that were the case. But I also, has there ever been a player in NFL history that was better at punt returning just by running straight than Troy Brown? Because he wasn't east to west. He was north south, and he was just going. And
I always loved that about him.
That special like the Steelers special teams unit parted like the red frickin' sea. Like they didn't know what to do, and all they did was run straight.
And I mean, he was another selfless guy, and we learned this throughout the rest of his career, that he didn't care what he did. I mean, we saw Troy Brown punt return, kick return, wide receiver, defensive back, linebacker, safety. Like, this dude he played quarterback at one point for a play or two. Like, the guy was just
in the season, actually.
he did. That's right.
Yeah.
Nobody questioned him because he was just a selfless New England Patriot. Like, he was Mr. Patriot. Like,
he was the first. He was the first.
He was the first Mr. Patriot.
There's a few Mr. Patriots that came down the line. I can't think of any off the top of my head. Again, once 2003 hit, Patriots knowledge is out the door. But he was that first Mr. Patriot, the do-it-all. What do you need me to do, Bill? I'll go do it.
I would just argue, and I don't really want to argue on this show, but for me, Mr. Patriot is still Bledsoe. Because if Troy Brown is told that there's someone else that's a younger kid, he's not as good, he's unproven, we're gonna go with him instead of you. I don't think it's the same result, and that's not a slight on Troy Brown. That's fair. It's just I think Bledsoe is Mr. Patriot.
This concludes part one of the 2-part premiere of this New England Championship ReWrap. Join us all next week for the conclusion as we go into some of the memories, shed a few tears, and experience something we all thought was impossible, a speechless moment from Joe Malkin. All that and more as we wrap up the most memorable season and maybe the most important game in Boston sports history, Super Bowl 36. If you enjoyed today's show, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a comment. Give us a follow on social media. All the links to our pages will be in the show notes below. For the rest of the Sunday Night Sports Wrap crew, I'm the real BK Bob Kelly. We'll see you next week.
Are you passionate about saving the planet for future generations? Do you want to learn how to do it? If yes, then you need to tune in to the Nature Back podcast. It's a talk show covering the changing world around us, from renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, circular economy, to ESG and social innovation. Don't miss this opportunity to discover how you can join the movement and make a difference. Subscribe to the Nature Back podcast today on your favorite platform and get ready to be amazed.
Miles, are you ready to record our promo for Season 2 of the Wanna Bet podcast?
David, have you ever seen a grown man naked?
Miles, we're not here to quote lines from Airplane. We're here to tell people that Season 2 starts August 18th.
But I like Airplane.
I know you do, but Wanna Bet is a sports betting podcast. Each week we bet $1,000 on the NFL teams and games that we love.
Well, that sounds like fun.
It is fun. And last year you picked over 60% of your games correctly.
How'd you do?
We're not talking about that. We are telling people that they can find us every Friday. So no more movie quotes.
Roger.
Electricast.